Jenny Mitchell is an artist from Aotearoa, New Zealand, who was recently on our shores, actually, which I will be talking to her about, amongst other things. But the reason for our conversation is the release of her third album, Tug of War. It follows Wildfires in 2018 and The Old Oak in 2015. And it's simply an extraordinary, wonderful, beautiful piece of work. So it's always a pleasure to talk to Jenny, and I'm happy to do so now again. Hello.
Hello, thanks so much. That's very kind.
Oh, well, look, it is just a beautiful piece of work. The sort of immersive musical experience that any music lover would love, I think. And you performed some of the songs from this album live, and I saw you actually. When we're talking, it's a week ago today, supporting Fanny Lumsden on her Deep in the Fallow tour. And I brought a friend with me who didn't know your music, obviously never heard you sing, and her mouth was open and she just said, "This is wonderful, amazing." So how did that tour go?
It was great. Yeah, as you would have seen at the show, it was so much fun, and I just love the album Fallow. I obviously love Fanny and the team, but it's really special to be part of, that final lap for them for that album, with songs that I just love and can like sing along to. And yeah, it was lots of fun.
And also some of them joined you on stage. Well, Fanny, Dan, Paddy and Tom, who is Fanny's brother, joined you on stage for one of your songs. So that must have been nice as well. And you joined Fanny on stage for one of her songs.
Yeah, and I think that's such a nice thing to do for your support act. It's a very generous, gracious thing to do. And we actually weren't planning to do that initially, but we did an interview on Triple R in Melbourne, and I sang that song. And just before we were going on air, I was like, "Oh, if you guys want to join in, you can join in, that would be cool." And they did, and it was just like such a special moment. And so yeah, we added that onto the show, which was a real highlight.
And I should say the song was Trouble Finds a Girl, which has a video where you are joined by lots of different people as well. So for those of us in the audience like me who'd seen the video, who knew that song, it was just a beautiful way to do it live. So maybe you record an alternate version acoustically with those performers. Who knows? It's just my wish as a fan. Jenny, do a version with Fanny. So you're also coming back this way for Big Sound, which will be happening in Queensland later this year. So that was, I believe, an application process for performers to come to Big Sound.
Yeah, so it's sort of a half conference, half festival kind of thing. And the country world in Australia and New Zealand isn't overly familiar with the format of a festival like this. So it's definitely a bit of a new experience for a lot of us. And basically it's a chance to showcase your show, and you do play like a festival set, like it's a show that the public can come and watch, but it's also a bit of a showcase for other festival bookers, or some people are looking for agents or managers or whatever, labels or whatever they're looking for. And so, yeah, it's basically a chance for the industry, who are all music lovers, to all get together and see what is happening at the moment and what acts are touring and what show they're going to be touring and things like that. So, yeah, it's really exciting, and has come an opportunity that's come at a really great time for this album and for us.
Yeah, it did make me think though about the technicalities for you as an artist in New Zealand when opportunities are in Australia. So you came over for Fanny's tour, and I know that to an extent, logistically, it's almost like just being in another state, because New Zealand's closer to the east coast of Australia than the west coast of Australia is close to the east coast of Australia. But still, it is a different country. So you came over for Fanny's tour, you're coming back for Big Sound. And I was thinking about what it's like to be in New Zealand when there are opportunities in Australia, because obviously you want to stay at home. You don't necessarily want to move here. And is it therefore you having to think of your career in a two-nation way?
Yeah, I always tell people that I have a trans-Tasman career. And I think that for the time being, I really love being here, but I'm also not, anti-moving to Australia. I think that I'd love to be on the ground there for a time and be able to do all the touring that I'd like to. And I guess it literally comes down to the practicalities of, if you're going to create a sustainable career, that there are only 5 million people in New Zealand. And so it's like one big city of Australia. So for that reason, a lot of people do fly over and move and stay there. And yeah, like I said, I'd like to do that. But I think, like you say, also it's like 3-hour direct flight to Sydney. It's so easy, and thankfully we can do that again. I almost didn't believe that we were going to be able to. I was like, something, might happen, so don't get your hopes up. And thankfully we had no hiccups along the way, and I was able to be there. But I think there is an opportunity for lots of people, I guess, to have that dual career, which is great. I think we're lucky.
Yeah, well, that's good, because I was thinking, it must be hard a little it's certainly more than Australian artists have to think of. We can just think, not we, they can just think of Australia, whereas you actually have to really have your brain in two places at once. Not even, I think, in a way Canadians have to, because popping over the border to the US is a little easier. You can just drive, for one thing, and it's like one big North American market. But I think for an artist like you, where your sound is so powerful and your audience are potentially so large, it is obviously logical. Just takes a bit more planning, maybe.
Yeah, and probably the biggest challenge is the band. Like with Fanny, I was just touring on my own, which is pretty easy and keeps costs low and things like that. But when you're over here, when I am over here, I've got this band that we're rehearsing with for the tour, and we, have got, I feel like, a really cool thing going on. And at the moment, I can't afford to bring them over with me, which gives me the opportunity to play with amazing Australian players, which is super fun. And, like there's upsides to it always. But yeah, it's sort of like you've got to have 2 rehearsals and all those kinds of things. So yeah, it's just sometimes it can feel like double the work, but I feel like I have great experiences because of that I might not otherwise.
And you do have tour dates coming up. I saw them on your website. And you are from someone who was originally from the South Island, now living in the North Island. So when you're choosing those places to play, do you think, I really want to be on the South Island because it's home, or do you just pick where makes the most sense in terms of size of audience?
I think I used to tour a lot in the South, literally just for logistics reasons. I would just get in my car and only drive so far. So I used to tour a lot there solo, and I will always go back. Like I've got key, I guess, southern spaces, central southern dates, including my hometown of Gore. The whole tour will finish up in Gore with a big fun show at the end, which will be awesome. But yeah, this tour is my first sort of main centre, the cities, I guess, of New Zealand, with a few other important shows like Gore and some southern stuff mixed in. And it's the first time that I have toured with a whole band. So I suppose we are going to places where either we know there is a big population, or we know that there's a big country music loving population. So whichever one works for us. And yeah, we're just really excited to get going.
So when you were talking about getting in your car and driving around, at what age did you start doing that, just taking off and playing shows?
I did shows still like around New Zealand for years before I actually could drive and stuff, and my mum and dad were very, very supportive, and they actually love it sort of as much as I do. So dad is a musician and a singer, and so he would often come with me, or my sister sometimes would come along, where it was a bit of a family thing. But when I left home, I was 17 and went to uni, and that's when I had a car and could actually get myself there. So that's when it sort of started becoming more frequent.
Yeah. Yes, and you've recorded with your father and your sisters, and that was an EP, I think, some sessions that was released last year. So obviously music is, one could say, in the blood, but certainly watching you perform live, there's a real sense of destiny at work. Like, it just seems like you are completely made to do what you are doing, and you're very much, as a performer, in the moment, in the note. It is a really special experience seeing you live. Wondering if you've always felt like it's destiny for you to do this.
That's a good question. I'm glad you feel that way. I think so. I think I feel, very much myself when I am playing and things like that. I've never felt uncomfortable or nervous to be. I've been nervous to play shows, but I've never felt nervous to be on a stage and things like that. And I think that's just because Dad, I guess, encouraged and taught us how to share music. Like, it's all about sharing this gift with people because it can make people feel good. Basically, that's where it came from, and it's all about community and celebrating, you know, music and how great it is. So I think because that has always been instilled in me, I have always just felt like it's my job, my duty or something.
This is not at all to sound patronizing, but your parents must be very proud of you, actually, I would think.
Yes, I think so. They, I think people have funny views on the whole family music thing. Like everyone's like, oh, it must be so nice. And it is lovely, but we don't just, you know, like walk around the house singing in harmony. It's not like that all the time, but it is actually, on a serious note, it's a real joy to be able to share music and know that, you know, even though like when I have moved away, it's been something that has really kept me connected to my dad and to my sisters, and playing shows together is just such a treat. And so it's really quite a special way as you grow up, and like my sisters are about to leave home and things like that. So you naturally don't see each other as much, but music is kind of the thing that does tie us all together, which is nice.
Yes. Now, speaking of this album, Tug of War, when did you start writing for it?
I don't know how old the oldest one is, but when I started like properly working towards it was 2020, and Lucy was the first song that we started working on. And I knew that I wanted to start working on a new album, but we were right in the depths of harsh lockdown at that time in New Zealand. And so I started working on it remotely with Matt Fowle. He was in Sydney, and we just slowly worked on that song and layer by layer, like added bits. And then the next one was Somehow, which was a similar experience. We were just working on that song, which was actually quite special to just be able to focus on that sound and what was going on there. And then from there, we started working on kind of like the whole collection of them. And it took about a year, back and forth doing different things. I had to get into studios to do my parts, and we had lots of the players were still recording from their home studios and things like that. So it was quite a journey. But yeah, really interesting experience doing it that way.
Now, you, when you performed Lucy live, and I saw you last week, there was a story about the song, and I've actually forgotten the details. So I wondered if you could retell the story.
Of course, yeah. So Lucy is actually about Lucille Ball, who is a very iconic woman and character. She was an actress and owned her own production companies and things like that. And so I didn't know anything about her because I'm a bit young to have known I Love Lucy, the show that made her famous. But I was studying film at university, and I had to study a show from that era and ended up being given her show. And I really loved the kind of, I don't know, contrast of the character lived a very stereotypical housewife, like 50s housewife kind of life. And she had dreams of being an entertainer, but never sort of pursued them. And I felt like that was sort of the opposite to me, that sometimes, I don't know, if I'm on tour and it's been a long road, or it's been a tough show or whatever, I'm like, oh God, why can't I just, have a nice house and just stay home and everything would be nicer. But obviously that's very much not the case, and I would never change a single thing. So it's basically about the idea of that we're always, looking at other people and thinking, oh, that would be so nice. But really what we've got is probably pretty great if we have a look. So that's what that one's about.
And now the title track, I'm wondering, Tug of War, I'm wondering if that was always going to be the album title from the time you wrote the song, or if it was the late title track choice.
Yeah, actually, it is a late title track choice. That actually, now you've just jogged my memory, that is the oldest song on the album. That was written years and years ago. And it's a song about running into an old flame and having to decide whether to pursue that or not. And ultimately I do not in the song and in the real life. But I was writing lots of different songs about lots of different themes, and in the end I didn't really know how to summarize the album. And then Tug of War, even though the song itself is about seeing this old flame, the idea of being pulled in different directions and ups and downs and different stages of life, that there's songs on this album about moving away and leaving a job and leaving a relationship and losing my grandfather, and lots of growing up things that can often be condensed into the first few years of your 20s often. And so it felt like a fitting kind of summary, I guess, of all those different ups and downs.
Yeah. And you also mentioned at the show when I saw you that your Snakes in the Grass, which is a track on the album, is about your sisters, and you talked about your sisters just about to leave home, and you said, the song was prompted by the fact that they've started to take an interest in romantic relationships, which you found a little unsettling as their big sister. So is that was there an initial one spark for the song?
Kind of. I mean, I probably make them sound like they're idiots. They're really not. They're very, very smart young women. But I was just kind of laughing watching them, maybe make mistakes that I made, and just thinking about how I'm sure that people gave me advice that I'm trying to give them. And I was just sort of thinking about that kind of generational thing, that obviously you just have to go through it, and some people are just more predisposed, I guess, to be following roads that maybe they know are not going to end very well. I hate to, I hope people don't think that I think that they are silly. They are very smart people, but it's just an interesting experience being big sis watching all that play out.
No, I think in the song it doesn't at all come across that they're silly. It's more you just saying, I really am trying to warn you here. Just be alert.
Yeah, be alert. Yeah.
There's a song on the album called "Make Peace with Time," which is just really beautiful. It's hard to describe it, and I think that's part of the trick with music. It's hard to describe it in words. People need to go and listen to the song. But that song really stood out for me the first time I listened to the album, and it's a philosophical song, making peace with time. It's quite an emotional song, very rich. I'm wondering if there are other things you've learnt to make peace with that inform the writing of that, not just making peace with time.
Yeah, that song is they're all personal, but that's a pretty personal, raw song of the record. And the obvious kind of themes of it is that I was writing it when we were in the depths of a really harsh lockdown here, and I was just so unsure about what music was going to look like on the other side, like everybody was. And I just didn't know, everything was just upside down. I was like, I just don't know what I'm meant to do if I can't do this. And I realized how much of my value that I was placing on, I love playing live. It's my favorite part of the whole thing. I love lots of parts of music, but playing live is my favorite thing. And so when I wasn't doing that, I just felt so empty and lost. And that's where the start of the song came from. So it was making peace with things being out of control, out of my control. I couldn't do anything, and I had to just learn how to be happy with being a human and not being a human on stage. And there's also sort of hints to the relationship that ended during the process of creating this album. It was a relationship that there was no bad blood as such. So I was definitely making peace with just letting go and knowing that it wasn't right. And so, being able to let change happen, I guess. So that's very relevant for my life, and probably will be, I guess, forever.
Well, and I think it's relevant for other people's lives, and that's part of the art of what you do, is creating something that's specific to your circumstances, but that other people can relate to. And I also find it extraordinary still that out of the great difficulties that musicians have had over the past couple of years, that you can harness all of that difficulty into a song like that, as opposed to being blocked. Because I would think with all that change and the lack of momentum, really, for so many artists, it was just coming to a stop. And as you said, didn't know what was on the other side, to corral all of that and come up with something. So do you feel sometimes when you're writing that it's coming from the ether, basically, that there is just this song that needs to be written? Or do you feel very much that it's coming from inside you? That makes sense.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I love the theory. I can't think of people right now, but there's lots of people that talk about it in a really beautiful way, that it doesn't come from me, it doesn't come from the writer. And it sounds like a bit airy fairy, but I do really believe in that, because I think you can learn songwriting as a craft, you can work on it. And there are songs that I've written that I really love that you know, I've sat down and been like, okay, we're going to write a song today, we're going to write about this, or something has happened to me, like I've had an experience and I've really wanted to write about that. So there has been, you know, the conscious decision to write songs. But then there are some songs that, like, I don't really understand where melodies come from. I don't know, like, people often ask, like, what comes first and things like that. How do you write songs? And I don't know. It's such a strange thing to answer. And so for that reason, because of my confusion of where these things come from, I definitely think, or I like to think of it as something that comes from somewhere else. And I think it's also kind of takes the ego out of it as well. Like that, you know, Trouble Finds a Girl is one actually that is about standing up for the mistreatment of women and the industry and in the world in general, and is such a special song for me. And when I play that, I just feel like I'm lucky to be like the thing that is telling that story, the human that's telling that story, or the voice that's, you know, singing the song or whatever. And so even though I wrote it and I created it, I feel like, I'm like, wow, I feel lucky to be part of this. It's such an interesting feeling. So yeah, I'm all about that theory. Whoever came up with that, I agree.
And Trouble Finds a Girl has the great line, it's Trouble's turn to lose, which I think it should be on t-shirts and socks and all sorts of things everywhere. And you know, part of songwriting is, I guess, expressing love for others, love for the world, and that is through words. But you have a song called Love Isn't Words, and that is about people demonstrating love in other ways. So I'm wondering if sometimes you found that there are challenges within family relationships, other relationships, where there are people who express love in a way that you don't, and whether that's actually prompted this song.
Yeah, Love Isn't Words is a very, very true story about my dad. And he, like lots of, you know, rural men, I guess, in particular, but also just, you know, lots of different people. But I think particularly in the rural community, we're not necessarily a family that run around and like tell each other we love each other every single day. And I think people that do that it's a beautiful thing, but we aren't. But I have never felt any doubt in my life about how my mum and dad or my sisters feel about me, or how I feel about them. And our wider family as well. I feel like it's just an unspoken thing. And I feel like I'm sad when I hear people say, when someone passes away, people often say, oh, I wish I had said this more, I wish I had done this more. And to me, I just feel like there's no doubt that, you know, for my family, we just almost don't need to say it. And I don't think that means you shouldn't say it, but that's basically my kind of, response to the idea that I just think you shouldn't regret that those things you haven't said, because if you have, you know, loved a person and cared for a person in their life, I just feel like they will know. Right. So that's what that one's about.
Which is such a beautiful thing to say, because yes, a lot of people do worry about that, but actions can speak louder than words, as the saying goes. And I think putting out an album into the world, or even a song, is and standing on a stage is actually an act of love towards the audience, because you're basically inviting them to share something with you, and you're taking a big leap of faith, because you're trusting that people will be there to receive it.
Yes, I've forgotten all about that. We haven't been, you know, it's funny. You're like, oh, you can't wait to play these shows, can't wait to play these shows. And then I'm like, oh yeah, we have to sell tickets and stuff. That's right.
People have to come.
Yeah. I know, but yeah, I think you just have to, if you're worried about that stuff too much, you probably never tour and never put on shows. So you just have to hope for the best and and just like spread the word and work. It doesn't happen without, you know, making it happen. But I think, if you dwell too much on if they were going to come, you might never get to play a show.
Well, you will be playing shows in New Zealand, and people can find the details on your website. You'll be back in Australia for Big Sound, and no doubt other shows in the future. And so, as I've said in this interview, seeing you live is just a beautiful thing. So people should definitely go and do that if they can. But in the meantime, they can listen to Tug of War. Jenny, congratulations on this wonderful album.
Thank you so much.